feel like I'm losing it.
Are you hallucinating?
Yes.
You need help,
Where
Grace.
exactly are you, Grace?
Has there ever been a more classic pairing in film than horror and religion? I mean, it's like Butch and Sundance, Batman and Robin, Peanut Butter and Chocolate. They just go so well together. Of course, that also means that there are a lot of them. Does this new one from writer-director Christopher Smith work? Well, I mean, yes and no. Consecration is a 2023 movie about a woman who investigates a mystery around her brother's death at a convent in Scotland. Now, first off, where have you been, Christopher Smith? When I saw that this movie was written and directed by him, I realized I'd kind of forgotten all about him, which is a shame because he had 3 movies right out of the gate that I loved in Severance, Triangle, and Black Death. Then he kind of disappeared off my radar for some reason, and I don't know really why. I mean, I guess he did some TV and a few movies that didn't get much fanfare, but he seems to be back with Consecration, and suffice to say, I was really excited to dig into this movie. The movie centers around Grace, who is an ophthalmologist working in London, and she receives tragic news that her brother has been part of some kind of a weird murder-suicide situation. He apparently is a priest who is living in this convent in Scotland, so Grace has to travel to Scotland and meets a detective who tells her that they believe her brother killed the head priest in this convent and then threw himself over a cliff, killing himself. Now, Grace, of course, doesn't believe any of that and wants to investigate further and visit the convent. So the detective brings her to the convent, and she's then introduced to Mother Superior and some of the sisters at the convent. Now, Mother Superior, who is an interesting kind of character, has no doubts about what happened. She claims that a demon or darkness had possessed her brother, then killed the priest, but then in a moment of clarity, the brother jumps off of a cliff in order to protect the members of the church. Grace, of course, is still not convinced with that kind of nonsense, so she decides that she's going to start looking in the details of the incident herself. Now, along the way, she ends up meeting Father Romero, who was sent from the Vatican to sort of clean this whole mess up by what he calls a reconsecration of the church. And he seems pretty willing to help her out however he can so that she can try to reconnect with her dead brother and find out what happened. Now, as Grace starts to dig in a little bit further, she starts kind of experiencing these visions, or I'm not really sure exactly what they are. They're visions, but they're also these like flashbacks of her past. It's kind of a little vague as to exactly what it is at first. Just sort of like these blackout moments that she has where there's like several times where she sort of like wakes up in a bed in a different place and not really sure how she got there. Now, as she's digging into this, she also ends up meeting some of the sisters at the convent and kind of ends up striking up a somewhat strange relationship with one of them who takes a particular fascination with Grace herself. Now, one of the things about this specific convent is they are regarded as kind of a bit on the fringe of the church. Like they're considered extremely devout in a way that is sometimes extremist in their views. And so much so that it kind of fosters this eclectic cast of characters that actually live there. On the surface, this is all great setup. And by and large, it's mostly done very, very well. The problem with all this is I feel like it's a little bit more scattershot than I think it should have been. So all at once, you kind of have Grace investigating her brother, getting flashbacks about her and her childhood, her horrible dad and things that he did to her, the sisters being kind of mysterious and weird, Mother Superior plotting something against Grace, Father Romero, who also is in on the plot, even though we don't really know the reason behind any of it, and the fact that he's seemingly on her side in other scenes. It just becomes like a lot of balls in the air at once. And sometimes it just kind of feels like it's a little more incoherent than it needs to be. And so what starts out as an intriguing mystery about her brother sort of transitions to a mystery surrounding her past specifically. And I don't think it handles that transition well enough. So in the middle of the movie, things are happening, but it doesn't seem to have a real strong driving force going forward. It's just sort of her running into these pieces of some kind of a conspiracy, but it never quite comes all together until everything sort of gets explained at the very end. Sometimes that works, and that is a way to go. In this case, it only sort of does. And because of that, I can't really talk about anything else without at least talking about some of the spoilers. This all centers around Grace's past, like her real distant past, and the question as to what Grace actually is. So the nuns' overall goal was Grace specifically. They didn't really even want the brother, they wanted her, because she's known as the relic. Although she is somehow unaware of all of this. So when Grace was 12 years old, she apparently brought back her dad to life, and her dad became like this crazy tyrant who killed her mother and then was captured and put in jail. At that time, Grace and her brother were adopted by the church, but that was just a ploy for the church to try and kill her, which failed. But then what happened after the botched adoption / kill by the church? Like, at that point, she was still only a child, so she still had to go to school, college, medical school, etc. Okay, so the movie says that she was kept in a tomb for seemingly, I don't know, like hundreds of years, but she wouldn't age. She'd stay 10 years old until apparently her tomb had crashed on some rocks, spilling her onto the beach, where her parents found her and adopted her, setting this whole chain of events into motion. But my issue is, did she never know about her past for the 20 years after that happened? Like, I guess that the movie is suggesting that when she crashed on the beach, she had no memory of before that moment. Okay, I guess that's fine. But she was aware of the church trying to kill her and her brother. And then in the 20 years since, she never experiences any of these powers during that time. Like, I guess I still don't have a good explanation as to why she is considered to be so bad. I mean, we see hundreds of years ago people trying to hunt her. I mean, but that was the Dark Ages. So that's not crazy. But here she keeps being referred to as the Shadow. But I don't know what that means. She doesn't really seem to be doing any bad deeds. So why does everyone fear her so much? Is it just because her existence is a threat to them and their belief system? Because they believe that there's only one true God? I mean, I don't know. Also, why did they bother torturing the brother for the brother to tell them where the relic, meaning Grace, was, if they already knew that the sister was the darkness the entire time? Like, they tried to adopt and kill her before. It didn't work. Why did they just give up? Like, why not look for her again? Why wait for her brother to come to the convent so that he could try and find answers and then torture him to get her whereabouts? Like, it just all feels very loosey-goosey to me. What I loved about this movie is the atmosphere, the pacing, the casting. I love the patience that it has throughout, the slow push-ins, the creepy reveals, the really heavy performances, all done without any silly jump scares. Also, the idea of this movie is really intriguing, and it ends up going in a direction I wasn't expecting, as there's a bit more of a nod to Triangle than I would have guessed. The problems just come down to, I think the movie loses its way a bit in the middle, and it sags slightly, which is a shame because I think this really could have been a great horror film. I'd give this movie a B, but let me know what you think.